It's Thursday, April 17th, 2025. Once again, the difference between the Trump White House and the opposition could not be more stark. Capitulation from Canada, and RFK Jr. spells out how he plans to find answers on autism. Next on the AM Update.
The Democrats and the media in this room wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrego Garcia as a Maryland father.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated.
I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University.
Doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real.
The government of El Salvador denied a request from Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen to see or speak to Abrego Garcia. Senator Van Hollen says that Garcia is one of his constituents. Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is being held at a high-security prison for terrorists in El Salvador. Senator Van Hollen traveled all the way to El Salvador to no avail, trying to see Abrego Garcia and stand in solidarity with him. Now, you heard me yesterday say I'm not sure if actually Abrego Garcia is a member of a gang, the MS-13 gang, or not. It doesn't matter, though, because he was already an illegal alien that was not up for debate. Well, Caroline Leavitt at the White House yesterday came with the facts and brought some previously unreported on court documents from Maryland proving that Abrego Garcia was a woman beater while he was in the United States, and brought some documentation proving that he is a member of MS-13. Here is Leavitt during a previously unscheduled press briefing at the White House.
Today we have officially learned Democrat officials still refuse to accept the will of the American people. Maryland Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen rushed to Dulles Airport this morning to fly to El Salvador, potentially using taxpayer dollars, to demand the release of deported, illegal, alien MS-13 terrorists. The Democrats and the media in this room have continually and wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrego Garcia as a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Abrego Garcia was also arrested with two other well-known members of the vicious MS-13 gang. And two separate judges found that Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13, and that finding has never been disputed. And just this morning, it was revealed through Maryland court documents that Abrego Garcia's wife petitioned for an order of protection against him for two instances of domestic violence in May of 2021.
That is Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, yesterday, spelling out in no uncertain terms and bringing the receipts that Abrego Garcia, this man that every single Democrat, it seems like, underneath the sun has been lining up and standing in solidarity with, he is just as bad as the next illegal alien violent criminal. He's just a terrible, awful human being. But White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt wasn't done there. An actual victim, an actual constituent of Senator Chris Van Hollen in Maryland is a woman named Rachel Morin, who was brutally murdered at the hands of an illegal alien. The mother of Rachel Hollen spoke at the White House yesterday and exposed the press in no uncertain detail and in gory detail about what actually happened to her daughter when she was murdered, raped, and raped some more. And this is how her mother sounded towards the end of that testimony in front of the press corps at the White House.
Why are we not protecting the American citizens? It's just common sense. Why are we not protecting our children? And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this. Thank you.
That is the mother of Rachel Morin, the mother of 5 who was brutally murdered and raped at the hands of an illegal alien, an actual constituent of Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, who spent taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to stand in solidarity with somebody who sounds an awful lot like the vicious man who raped and murdered Rachel Morin. Democrat Party is just an evil, evil, demonic construct. And boy howdy, that White House press briefing yesterday, it ended with Caroline Leavitt asking the packed room, do you have any questions? And thankfully, it seems like most of the press corps understood, no, we need to move on here. Nobody had any questions after that. Moving on, the Department of Justice says they're going to go to war against Maine over their shirking of Title IX guidelines from the Trump administration.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff. This is a violation of Title IX. The Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety.
That's Attorney General Pam Bondi. Meanwhile, across the pond, a rare dose of sanity, the UK Supreme Court ruled Wednesday that a woman is someone born biologically female, and that anybody identifying as female who is not actually a woman is, by legal standards, not a woman. The court said in the unanimous ruling, it shouldn't be seen as a victory by one side, but several women's groups that supported the appeal celebrated outside the court and hailed it as a major win in their effort to support female-only spaces. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell spoke for the first time in quite a while yesterday. A lot of people interested to hear what he has to say about U.S. Treasuries and interest rates. He says, basically, he's going to stay the course.
Looking ahead, looking forward, the new administration is in the process of implementing substantial policy changes in 4 distinct areas: trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. These policies are still evolving, and their effects on the economy remain highly uncertain. As we learn more, we will continue to update our assessment. The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Both survey and market-based measures of near-term inflation expectations have moved up significantly, with survey participants pointing to tariffs.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell saying that more inflation is on the way. Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, I saw this interview. I just want to say this parenthetically, not going to play a full clip from that interview, but he had an interview with Bloomberg the other day, and he talked about how he has a weekly breakfast with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. And he said, so far, it's kind of like they just want to stay the course. That would be the Federal Reserve. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he has a number of tools in his toolkit that can help mitigate some of the inaction or actions, well, depending on what the Federal Reserve does or does not do. Bessent says he has a lot of tools in his toolkit to help mitigate anything that he sees as detrimental from the Federal Reserve. The first skirmish in the U.S.-China trade war just concluded, and Mark Carney is left licking his wounds. The Canadian Prime Minister said his government will allow automakers to import U.S.-manufactured cars and trucks without tariffs as long as the companies continue to build cars in Canada, and continued with previously announced expansions, which, of course, they all vowed to do. Last week, Carney put retaliatory tariffs of as much as 25% on all vehicles made in the U.S., effectively matching an earlier move by U.S. President Donald Trump on foreign autos. Carney is now backing down. China is reportedly laying out a set of preconditions for resuming trade talks with President Trump. According to Bloomberg, China is demanding respect. They didn't like J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance's commentary about Chinese peasants. They want a unified vision for American messaging. They want to know what our end goal is. Yeah, that's part of the negotiation. You got to come to the table to see what we want. And they want an actual identifiable point person to do these negotiations with. That's Bloomberg making those reports. Back-channel negotiations, or back-channel signaling, I guess, from the Chinese Communist Party that they're ready to cut a deal at some point. When we come back, James Boasberg, that little pissant judge, back in the spotlight again. You'll never guess who tried to firebomb Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania governor, while he and his family were asleep. And some good news about that U.S. pastor, missionary to South Africa I told you about earlier this week. That's all coming up next. A federal judge said Wednesday he's found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt for failing to return 2 planes deporting illegals to El Salvador last month. In a 48-page order, the U.S. District Judge James Boasberg said that the court had determined the Trump administration had demonstrated a willful disregard for his March 15th emergency order, which temporarily halted, tried anyway, deportation flights to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. Boasberg had also ordered all planes bound for El Salvador to immediately be returned to U.S. soil, which did not happen. So even though he's gotten smacked down, James Boasberg has gotten smacked down by higher courts, he's still trying to play this game with the Trump administration now, attempting to hold them in contempt. And the least surprising news of all time, this is from Penn Live. The suspect in the arson attack at the governor's residence targeted Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania governor, due to his perceived stance on the made-up nation of Palestine. It's according to a search warrant obtained by Penn Live. The suspect, Cody Balmer, called 911 following the attack early on Sunday, identified himself by name, and told operators Shapiro needs to know, quote, he will not take part in his plans for what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. Balmer continued saying, quote, he needs to stop having my friends killed and that our people have been put through too much by that monster, according to the warrant, which says Balmer's intonation and cadence sounded like he was possibly reading from a script. That story again courtesy of Penn Live. The least surprising news of all time. A pro-Hamas sympathizer trying to burn the Jewish governor's home while he and his family slept. I'm glad they got out alive, but this is just freaking ridiculous. An American pastor abducted by gunmen during his sermon at a South African church last week was rescued during a deadly high-stakes shootout which left 3 suspects dead. Josh Sullivan, a 45-year-old, was rescued by the Hawks, it's kind of a special forces priority crime unit, during a fatal shootout in the southeastern port city of Kibera on Tuesday. That's according to the South African Police Service. 3 unidentified suspects were killed. Sullivan was found miraculously unharmed in a safe house. Police arrived at the safe house and discovered the 3 individuals inside a vehicle. The Texas teen accused of fatally stabbing a high school football star at a track meet allegedly lives in a $900,000 home with his family inside a luxurious gated community, despite requesting that a judge lower his $1 million bond because of financial difficulties. Carmelo Anthony, that 17-year-old, is holed up with his family at a pricey home inside the gated community of Richwoods in Frisco, Texas, after he was released from jail Monday at a reduced $250,000 bond for allegedly murdering Austin Metcalf earlier this month. The home, where rent is estimated to be $3,500 a month, had a white Suburban, a black Acura, and a 3rd sedan in the driveway on Tuesday, according to the Daily Mail. Residents in the gated community were allegedly unaware the family was living at the home until Anthony was released on Monday and have voiced concerns about having the accused killer in their exclusive neighborhood. Carmelo Anthony, this accused cold-blooded murderer, raised almost $500,000 for his legal defense fund. And now here's this. Last week I told you RFK Jr. made a big promise in his job as Secretary of Health and Human Services. He says he wants to find answers to what's actually causing the autism epidemic by September. Yesterday, he went into more details about what's driving this investigation.
In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, and he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18. The autism rate they found was 3.3 per 10,000, so that's in line with the 1 in 10,000 that was found in Wisconsin 17 years earlier. For context, today, the last number of 1 in 36 is 83 times higher. In 1987, out of every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism. Today, there are 27,777 for every million. If you accept the epidemic deniers' narrative, you have to believe that researchers in North Dakota missed 98.8% of the children with autism. That thousands of profoundly disabled children were somehow invisible to doctors, teachers, parents, and even their own study. The same researchers who followed the original cohort for 12 years to double-check their number, they went back in 2000 and found that they had missed exactly one child. So doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real.
And finally, it's time for our poll of the week. I asked you, who is the real practical leader of the Democrat Party? And I said no meta answers, no tongue-in-cheek answers, as witty, clever, and true as they may be. No answers like Moloch, Satan, nothing like that. I want to know, in practical terms, who you think the leader of the Democrat Party is, because I think it's instructive as to whether actually there is a leader, and if there is one, are they actually following his or her direction? Here are the options I gave you. Who are the practical leaders or leader of the Democrat Party? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jasmine Crockett, Bernie Sanders, or other? Comment below. We'll get to those in just a little bit. Here's the order of finish. The fewest to the last place is Jasmine Crockett, only 9.9%. Bernie Sanders is next in third place at 10.6%. In second place, other at 32.7%, and 46.9% say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Something I'm learning, I think, about X polls is that a lot of people just click on the first option, no matter what the poll is. And I'm guilty of that too sometimes. Here's what you had to say. Redacted says it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not remotely settled. Bernie's been an outsider for decades, although well-known. Crockett is getting plenty of attention for now. I still think someone like a Stephen A. Smith could take the lead for the non-extremists. Caravan says they're still trying to figure it out. I don't think there is one currently. Kyle says you're taking all the fun out of it. Otherwise, I would say Lucifer. I said no meta answers, even though Lucifer is probably the correct answer. Blake says Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Morgans. Real question is who's writing the script. Liberty Linda says George Soros and Son are the real leaders. Justin says AOC, Crockett, and to some degree Sanders are in the current mouthpiece position. Auburn Tiger also says George Soros. Mickey says no answer. I was thinking about this today. I got nothing. So Mickey says no answer. There's no leader right now. Bob says, I think maybe J.B. Pritzker. That's interesting. Because he does seem like he wants to run, but he's not out there doing the speaking circuit that I'm aware of at the moment. That's an interesting observation. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. Michael says they don't have one. Pat says there isn't one. Rob says they look rudderless, but it's still George Soros. Bo says the jury's still out. Andy says, I think the Obamas are still pulling the strings. There were a few who said the Obamas, and I think that's still true to some degree, but I don't think we recognize under the surface amongst the real adept politicos on that side of the aisle, I think we underestimate how much the Obamas have kind of outstayed their welcome. There was some, during the last election, I for whatever reason, X was feeding this to me every now and again. Just commentary from left-wing politicos I'd never heard of, operatives that most people have never heard of before. And there were a few who were very critical of Barack Obama, basically blamed the Obama time in office, blamed him for the conundrum they found themselves in last fall. Because there is no kind of bench of up-and-coming leadership in the Democrat Party. And this individual explained that it was because of Barack Obama's ego, narcissism, he would not allow anybody to even come close to outshining him. Veni Vidi Velcro says the media is in charge. Jay Breezy says, I think it's Bernie pushing and backing AOC. Harold says Jeff. Don't know who that is. Connor says, still Obama. Bo, I don't have a name, but it's kind of the point. Some hidden deep state figure, CIA or rich globalist. David says Obama. Priva says CNN, MSNBC, CBS. Brian Time says the hive mind has no leader. No earthly leader. I'll kind of get to that in a little bit. But it is definitely a hive mind right now. Craig says they're still trying to fundamentally transform America, Obama's strategy. Andrew says Schumer has passed his time. They are positioning themselves now, and no clear leader has emerged yet. Lynn says Obama. Brenda says Soros. Joel says deep state. So I think we're seeing a theme here. If it's not going to be Satan, if it's going to be practical forces here right now, we all agree that to some degree, Moloch is really who's driving the Democrat Party. It's a demonic force. But in terms of their practical leadership, it is either AOC, okay, that's who finished first in the voting. It's either that, Soros, Obama, the deep state, or the media in that order, because those are the four other options that we heard come up the most. Basically, what we're seeing here is that this is the same Democrat Party it's been for the last 20 years, but absolutely the last 10 years. Just absolutely bat crap crazy, driven by demons. But what we're seeing now is different in that it's not constrained by any strong leadership at the top. It's really not. There's no pragmatism here. It's just unabashed, 200 proof, straight, no chaser, evil, but with no strategy either. It's fascinating to watch, and we will watch it. When we come back tomorrow, it's going to be another Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story you think needs covered on the AM Update. Ask or Tell Me Anything. Look for the pinned post at Real AM Update on X. That's going to do it for Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.